Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Farrell, Artistic Director of Painting, Drawing, and Printmaking and our Artists in Residence program. Welcome to our Artists in Residence slide night. I want to welcome our virtual participants watching tonight as well. 16 artists just arrived at the ranch and will be working in the studios here for the next 5 weeks. We'll be hearing from each of them tonight. So before we begin, please silence your cell phones. And for our land acknowledgement, I want to recognize that the Anderson Ranch campus resides on the historic tribal lands of the Ute people, who've called this area home for over 800 years. In honor of this legacy, we focus on building an inclusive community here, maintaining this as a space for inspiration and creativity in the center of the Rocky Mountains. So please join me in welcoming our artists in residence.
All right, first up, wrote some notes. Okay, so my name is Susie Smith, and I'm from Winnipeg, Canada, which is Treaty 1 territory, and that is the homeland of the Ojibwe Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm predominantly a print-based artist, but that often expands into installation, sculpture, textile, and moving image. And I really enjoy in print the kind of like restrictions and boundaries that it kind of provides me with that I can push against, which is something I always enjoy. So for example, there we go. I often, instead of making flat prints, sometimes I'll make sculptural works out of print. Instead of making editions, I often use print as a tool to make one-of-a-kind works. And instead of using paper, I often print onto found materials. So in this piece called Hammers to Break and to Build, I created a 3D model that I then turned into a pattern that I could screen print and fold into sculptures, and it's an open edition. In this piece titled Infinity System, I made 4 different editions on hardboard panels that fit together in different ways because I wanted to create kind of like a wallpaper that didn't repeat was the idea with it. So they all fit together in different ways and can adapt to different galleries that I show it in or different spaces that I show it in. And that's also an open edition. During the pandemic, when I didn't have access to Print Studio and when everyone was kind of like rethinking different structures in our lives, I decided to make a stop-motion animation from the previous work that I just showed, where I just continuously reinstalled the same piece over and over again into different configurations. And each panel had a sound that corresponded with it. So whenever it appeared on the screen, it also kind of created a different noise. So then it's like the image kind of drove the sound, or the sound drove the image, and back and forth. Oh, already at 1 minute. Okay, I'll go quicker. I do a number of different series that often kind of have parameters on them to use to create one-of-a-kind works. So in this, I used a stencil of a loose leaf sheet of paper that I printed over and over again into different configurations to create a series of unique works. And then while I'm here, I'm going to do some screen printing projects, but I'm also going to expand into monoprint and monotype works where I use found material as the starting point, and that's thinking about ideas of reuse and mending and repair and kind of using it as a generative process. And I really enjoy that monoprint and monotype is really about kind of like documenting the object, but also documenting the absence of the object. And that's probably me. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie. I largely have a background in geology and architecture, and that sort of comes through in the work that I do. These are two pieces that were somewhat sculptural, but somewhat used as tools to observe avalanches on the left and rockfall on the right. These were two discs made out of like wood and MDF and acrylic with the material sandwiched in between, and they were on pedestals that could spin, so I could like circle these objects around to see how the internal materials would flow and sort of replicate avalanches as the lighter, finer white sand flowed over the denser black sand below. A lot of my work focuses on process, and I like to think through subtractive methods, predominantly, I would say. So this was a piece that I did where the emphasis was on like heat and how we can use heat and wood. So I scored a log and burnt it for about like 8 hours, slowly sort of coaxing the coals and embers into the center of the wood to sort of harness where the wood itself was excavated. And then I used that as a press mold for a ceramic vessel that can then be nestled and sort of sandwiched between these two pieces. Sort of following a similar theme, during the pandemic, I worked on a project where I sculpted 6 unique bars of soap, sort of to be used for each of the World Health Organization's 6 hand washing gestures. And I was trying to sort of capture the washing away of each bar of soap in some sort of permanency or like library that could be observed even though the materials themselves had washed away. So I cast each bar of soap like 5 or 6 times after each few cycles of washing, and those can be seen on the left as they sort of disappear, and those are made out of rockite. And on the top, I also chose to replicate the original bar and then have that sort of eroded out of a block of concrete to sort of see that negative space captured as well. Thinking about circularity, this was a project where I was sort of thinking about washing away and how we could collect the materials that remain after washing. So I collected laundry lint from a bunch of dryers, and I felted them back together with a wool additionally. And this was a fun project because I was able to integrate some digital fabrication and develop a 3D printed tool that I strapped onto a jigsaw and strapped onto a CNC machine to felt this large swath of material, and you can sort of see the difference of the unfelted material on the left and then post-felting on the right. Yeah, that sums it up. Thank you.
Hello, excuse me. I'm Kim Mullis. I feel like I got here late, so I don't know how to use a clicker. I'm originally from Central Florida, and I moved to New York for school at the Cooper Union, where I studied mostly sculpture and photography. After school, I worked as a fabricator and with mostly like visual and window displays at different department stores. And during this time, I formed kind of out of my interdisciplinary studio practice, Wilderness Bodies, which was an idea for me to like connect my object making and my art. So for 10 years I worked there and just studied different like fabrication and production processes. So that's why I chose to show you this slide first. This is a clock that I've made like hundreds of iterations of. So I made up this like system of symbols, and then it also gives me a chance to play around with lots of different materials. Okay. And then next I'm here for painting, by the way. So the rest is predominantly paintings that I've made. These were some paintings I made that were shown in a show called Salvage Lab. So I started working on these like 10 by 15 MDF offcut panels. Excuse me. And this is just like another to show you the different type of materials that I like to use. So they got a little larger, and this one's called At Capacity. So after the pandemic, I finally decided to leave my job, and I decided to focus on my work full-time. I made notes and I'm not following them. Next, what I've been working on since a few years ago is that I started at the Vermont Studio Center, a series of tarp paintings. They come in 30 colors. Basically, I have been bleaching them and then going back in and painting like meticulously with stencils on top. This is my last one. I was gonna read a small artist statement, but I don't think I have time for that. Basically, the artist statement was good for it. There's no time. So you have the material of the tarp with these like loose gestures on them, and then I put these like super tight like graphic images on top. So those are like my two first dimensions. So while I'm here, getting back to the third dimension I mentioned earlier when we were introducing ourselves. So here I'm trying to work in the 3D. So we're taking these from flat surfaces to three-dimensional pieces. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen, and I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm just going to get right into this. Most of the work you'll be seeing here is actually in a show that is in San Francisco right now called Holding Space, Pattern, Form, and Thread. And forever, I have always been fascinated with pattern and structure. And thinking about that in terms of my research, even how our brains need to find and seek out pattern in the world to basically try to understand the complexities has been something that has been a driver for my work. These two pieces are some of the first pieces that I did most recently that started to look at sculptural form that use space, talked about negative space and in relationship to the form and how important that kind of collaboration needs to be with the objects themselves. I'm also very, very interested in repetition and modularity and how individual pieces can come together to create a whole, kind of a rich complexity in the form itself. I try to keep the forms very simple because the hope is that you come in and you look and you want to go deeper into the piece themselves to be able to look at that detail, kind of quieting yourself. I also love to think about an organic nature of the material. I choose to work with clay for the very reason that it is kind of a collaborator, and you have to have a relationship with it. It tells you what it might want to do. It might not be the same thing that you want it to do. So the hand is really important, and this kind of exploration of different types of building construction is really some of my focus that I'll be having in the residency this period. This Tracing the Void is one of the pieces that really started to spark my idea about really trying to make sculptures that need to and relate to the current environment that it is in, either large environment or as a negative space, and how that symbiotic relationship really plays for the environment and for the sculptures themselves. And finally, these two pieces, Roundhouse in particular is a two-piece piece, and so the idea of how do we try to integrate and play with the different kind of textural constructions and perhaps be modular sculptures as we move forward in my residency. Thank you. Oops, sorry.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to open my notes because I'm a notes guy. Okay. I'm Van Maltese. I'm visiting the ranch from Toronto, Ontario in Canada. And I have an interdisciplinary practice that operates on a foundational level through the language of painting. In my work, I employ trickery, illusion, and associative play to deconstruct the experience of perception. So I'm fascinated by processes of pattern recognition, brain plasticity, and how conflicts in what we see or hear can reshape our thinking. So these two works are from a series of 8 paintings titled Hypothesizing Coincidence. They contain imagery derived from blot printings that I did in my studio as an exercise for generating imagery. So it's sort of what you might think about if you're thinking about like a Rorschach test or klexography. And so I painted these renderings of blot prints, which resulted in this sort of like undulating, vibrating surface that are sort of active in the ways that the Rorschach tests are if you're trying to desperately find something recognizable in them. And then inclusive of that, the shapes dotting the edge of the frame are actually magnetic, made out of wood. The frame is powder-coated steel, and viewers are invited to reconfigure those magnets around the frame, therefore rendering them permanently unfixed, sort of in the way that like an optical illusion might be. This is a work called Trompe-l'oeil device. The reference for the fly comes from its presence in the history of painting, but most specifically in Giorgio Vasari's Lives, which was printed in 1550. And it was written that while Giotto was studying under Cimabue in Florence, he painted an extremely realistic fly on the nose of one of Cimabue's work. And upon returning to the studio, Cimabue attempted to shoo the fly away numerous times before he realized that he was being tricked by his apprentice. And so another thing I like about that story is Vasari was rumored to, he was a skilled storyteller, and it was rumored that he was capable of embellishing narrative at the expense of truth. So these are intended to look like realistic flies. They're made slightly larger than life. Oh my goodness, I'm really rambling on. And they're made out of silver, so when you enter the gallery, it looks as if it's infested by flies, which is not likely. Okay, I'm gonna try and go fast. These are inspired by shake-a-face cards. I have a few vintage ones in my studio if you wanna come by and play with them. The cards primarily include fragmentary drawings with kinetic chains, and they get shaken around to sort of like complete the image. And they are also permanently unfixed in the way that those earlier paintings I showed you were. I'm interested in them because there's a playful aspect, and they invite the viewer to actually participate in them by touching the chains and physically moving the compositions around. This is a series of cast shoe sculptures, so they're made out of aluminum and bronze. They're hand-painted to look like the real thing. But upon closer inspection, you realize that the illusion falls apart, and they are in fact sculptures of shoes and not shoes themselves. And then this is a sculpture similarly to the shoe sculptures. The coffee lid is a motif that reoccurs often in my work. I collect squished and discarded lids from the ground and cast them in bronze. I see us humans in them. You see that sort of resembles a face. Sort of squished from all sides by the weight of capitalism and using coffee to fuel ourselves to keep up with that. And then while I'm here, I'm gonna be drawing with my non-dominant hand. I brought a bunch of pencils in a bag, which is an addition that I made last year that invites you to participate in the project. There's a link to a blog on the back of the card, so if you'd like to have a pencil to try drawing with your non-dominant hand, I invite you to come get one from me after this. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Katie Stubbs. This is a pot. It's kind of a new series of things that I'm trying to work on, of sort of images that I'm interested in and collect, and sort of I'm trying to get to the bottom of something. I don't know yet. I studied illustration and cartooning, so I'm very interested in comics and that way of storytelling, and my work is very narrative, and yes, so here you can see it's like sort of comic panels, and sort of the story travels around the vase. Yep. I also really like collecting things, and so I love to use my pots and things as a way of, with the collection, with the things I have, by combining them, hope to build a story in their own way. This is a pot I made, and it is about some women beating up some men in the street, and it was based on the Bacchants of ancient Greeks. So I love ancient Greek stuff anyway, and so I like this sort of amalgamation of things, like throwing a lot at you. It's kind of fun. You get to make up a lot of stuff. And then this is a sort of a self-portrait I did in the end, because I didn't know what I looked like that well. So this is the things I'm interested in. So I thought that would be a good way of showing who I am. And that's it.
I'm Zach Betts. I'm from Minneapolis, and I'm here in the sculpture department. The work that I'll be showing was made within the last 16 months. Primarily, most of it was for a show called Going Nowhere Fast, and it was a lot about baggage that we carry on with us for far too long, burnout, kind of feeling stuck in place as well. But I would kind of just want to talk about more of like my overarching themes throughout the years, and like most of my work that I really love making focuses around like the physical and like visual language that I consider familiar. And I think about familiarity as something that's like often like close and near to us and becomes almost invisible due to its periphery. Such as like a keychain or an office partition. And I think about these things as, due to that invisible nature and that their periphery, they gain a bit of like our vulnerability, and they become these containers that get filled with like fragments of memory and space and trauma. And they kind of see like the worst and best parts of ourselves, like driving along and screaming in the car because we can't sing very well, so we scream into the air freshener. And so I think about these things and familiarity and how it becomes a bit different and a bit more like uneasy and unsettling when our expectations of it begin to shift and distort, especially through its materiality. And one thing that I'm really interested in doing here is kind of exploring that shifting of materiality through emotional and physical barriers. And so the newest work that I'm creating is all based on these like chain link fences that I've taken this rigid steel structure and I've mended it and distorted it and embodied it with other objects and recreated it in either cast or carved acrylic. So it has this invisible barrier to it as well. And the emotions that I'm really interested in kind of like embedding with these emotional objects are things of failure, dissatisfaction, reject, bullying, and how those things that can bring themselves into these objects, like this piece fenced in, which has a very sad, depressed tennis ball that's been smacked into the fence and is just stand still there. So, yep, thank you.
Well, hello, good afternoon. My name is Eduardo. I'm from Brazil. I'm an artist and a farmer, and I started working with art when I was in 2016. This is some of my work. I have interests like in the mysteries of outer space, the passage of time. On the left is a work called Dark Matter, and dark matter is something that we don't know how it looks because it absorbs all light. So this is how I imagine it. On the right is a work called Peroba, which is a tree, and it's a criticism for all the ancient trees which are cut in the Amazon and throughout Brazil and other forests. It's These are trees which grow for over thousands of years, and the name of the series is called Wisdom Lost. So when these trees are destroyed, I believe that trees, they have consciousness and they talk to each other through their roots. And when these trees are cut, there's a silence in the forest, and these wise voices are silenced. So this is a series I made for them. This work is called Com a Luz Vem a Sombra, which means with light comes shadow. It's on the right, you can see it's as if it's half of a vase, and the sun hits it and forms the shadow. In this work, I was inspired from, I live on a farm, and on my balcony, I can see shadows forming on the trees, on the pasture. So this is where I got this idea from. And I also have a lot of interest in the passage of time. And by seeing these shadows forming and spinning on the day, it's like a clock. And this is another work made of steel. It's also used from scrap metal. It's called acacia, which is another one of these trees. On the left, it's a work called Sodium. And it's based on an ex-girlfriend of mine. And on the right is Samauma, which is another one of these very ancient trees. And this is the beginning of my work with ceramics and with metal. This is my last work. It's called Self-Sabotage. It's like a inverse cactus, so the spikes go inward. And but in the same way, it looks as if it's light coming out, which means that despite my self-sabotage, light still shines through. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Courtney Sophia Yates. I'm a photographer, and I live in Brooklyn, but I am unapologetically Midwestern, and I'm from Michigan. So I'm a photographer and a director, and in all of my work, I'm really concerned with primarily nonverbal communication and how that really affects what happens in our lives, and generally just like really interested in what is our emotional experience as human beings. Not just with others like you see in this image, but with ourselves. This is a photo from a series called Trust, in which I worked pretty intimately with couples to ask them where trust shows up in their relationships, and that seems like that would have pretty obvious answers, but I always found that these conversations brought up really unique conversations between them. And there's like a really deep sense of intimacy between the three of us that I think is important. These are two images that are unrelated but feel related somehow. I know that I said I'm really interested in nonverbal communication, but one of the largest themes in my life and my work is the human singing voice. So here on the right, this is a woman, an artist named Hawa, and she is a singer, and singing has always been just the purest form of emotional expression to me, and is something that I just really want to continue to explore in photography. And when I speak about nonverbal communication and how that affects like our lives and our relationships, I am primarily interested in how Black Americans, how that is embodied in their lives, and how that's been embodied in my family's life. Sorry, that seems sort of like a random thought, but it's not. Here on the right, you see another image. This is the first singing image I made. This is an image of a gospel singer. I took this in Harlem, and this is really inspired by the experience I had of my father's death, when gospel music was a really important part of that mourning process, and literally the moment that he died. On the left is an image of an artist named Tomu, DJ. I put this image in here because I think the shape, the texture of her body, her clothes, the grass. I could cry just looking at it. I don't know why. It's so sort of innocuous, but it says so much to me, how she moves her body. This is an image in my parents' backyard. This is probably the last time that my father was ever outside, and this is my family. I'm really interested here in making, I've been saying it as like landscapes with people in them, much wider images than what I typically make, especially in my work as a commercial photographer, when we are really forced to be so close to the subject and really force the emotional reaction, not just from the subject, but from the audience. I want to understand how our bodies are moving in space and what that says about our lives and our relationships with each other. And yeah, I make a lot of video work as well, and that comes through there too, and hopefully comes through in the works that I will be making in the future. Sorry, I didn't realize there was more. This image I made on the left is of a couple I saw in Mexico City. This girl was crying so loudly and so hard. And there's like a deep sense of romance and tragedy that is really integral to my work. And on the right, I think that this is also a very emotional still life, and is something I'm interested in continuing here. Sorry if I went over. That's it.
Hi, my name is Christine Atkinson. I'm from Los Angeles. My work deals mainly with the ecology of Southern California and the effects of colonialism on the American West, and specifically our ecology. I'm a huge native plant nerd. I work in photography, sculpture, and installation. This is from a series that I did a few years ago titled For You and Those You Love, and they're photographs of either open space preserves or areas of active restoration within the, kind of areas of intense human habitation. And I photographed them at dusk or at night with a single flash. In conjunction with these photographs, I generally show them with these large-scale bird of paradise installations. The fronds themselves are desiccated, and then I'm coating them in green epoxy. They function as this sort of taxidermied element, which is really how I perceive them functioning in the landscape. They have no really ecological function, or no big ecological function. And they represent this erasure of the identity of the land in Southern California, despite being really big and pretty. And they also kind of land somewhere between a pile of yard waste and sort of a swamp monster, which I really like. They're also really gross when you get close to them. So epoxy or plastic is something that reoccurs in my work, and also wildfire debris does as well. I've made a series of cast epoxy cubes that have wildfire debris mixed in with them. These also include salt. I see these as the three elements as a representation of the three major elements in kind of the age we're living in. It's fire, plastic, and sort of this loss of water, which is represented by the salt. These also include wildfire debris. This is a newer series that I'll be working on here. It's titled The Beast That Haunts You. They're photographs of spaces that kind of represent the domestication of the West. So places where something has been lost or damaged or killed. And in this sort of illusion of forward progress. So on the left is the LA River, and then on the right is a Nike missile site on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I then print these in a traditional wet print, so there's kind of like this fossilization sort of contact within the photograph, and then coat them in wildfire debris. And then this is another, got way too close. This is another series that I'm gonna be working on here as well. They're kind of continuing these sites that have borne witness to some sort of destruction. This is at the site of the Oak of the Golden Dream, which is one of the first discoveries of gold in California. This is not the oak, my back is to the oak, but it's in this really specific area. So focusing on these sort of damaged and like places of great loss, and working with duality of like both black and white and color. And then I photograph a lot with a prism filter, which is why the images look so messed up. I was gonna say a different word. Look so kind of frenetic and damaged themselves. And that's me.
Hi, I'm Yixuan Huang. I'm from China, and I go by CC. I'm based in Brooklyn right now. So this is my body of work, which is a collection called Lost Stories. It's a collection of furniture and objects featuring a deconstructive reimagination of antique furniture with the aims of passing on the stories of people and objects lost in time. So to create them, I went to different places to collect antique and thrifted furnitures in conditions that is like not very well, like not be able to use anymore. I went to antique dealers, thrift stores, and Facebook Marketplace to chat with people about like the story behind the old furnitures I find, and then I go buy them, took them to my studio, took them apart, and put them back into furniture. And my whole intention for doing this collection is to evoke a sense of humanity by delving into objects encapsulated story and memories. So this project is my first furniture in this collection, and it's just called Cabinet 1. And this side, it's when I find it in a thrift store, it's look like that. And what I did is I took it apart. Well, I call it deconstructed it into components and return furniture into a raw material state and liberate narratives and puzzles of the past from their preconceived form. And to create a new materiality includes elements such as dirty paints, scratches, glue marks, and dust. And what I did in this cabinet is I closed back the components into pieces of wood, and then I draw out the silhouette of the old cabinet back into that new cabinet. So just trying to like keep the story of the old furniture continue, and I see the whole collection as like a reincarnation of old objects. And besides that collection, what I usually do is material exploration. This is a chair I did with plywood. So I usually try innovative techniques to like very simple, normal materials and try to find what can be like unexpected from this normal material. And that's what I'm hoping to do here too. I'm going to do experiment with paper and maybe resin and like any other ways to make paper sturdy and making them into lampshade and adding a new narrative to my old furniture collection. And that's it.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
I'm Eric.
We're from Boise, Idaho, most recently, and we're here for ceramics. Our work is about the disconnect between physical space and psychic space. And by psychic space, I mean emotions, expectations, mythology, fantasy, and how those get intertwined into our experience of physical space. We think that our collaboration also adds to that because we often having the same experiences as each other from two different perspectives. This piece was about cleaning up after other people. It was part of a show that we curated in Denver last spring in our backyard called Yard Work. It was advertised in Westworld, and like so many people ended up coming to our backyard. It was a little bit not what we expected, but it was cool. The pillar is thrown porcelain. Eric threw that on the wheel and then pierced a chain link pattern into it. It's full of trash that we pulled out of our ditch and then spray painted. And the top is like a classical style bust, which is thrown, the base is thrown, and then we made coil texture, and then this found object recreation that I do out of clay on the top.
And that exhibition was co-curated with Laura Leashill and Jared David Paul, who started that exhibition series.
The Yard Work series, which is still ongoing. So these are some of my object recreation pieces. They're all hand-built clay and then spray painted. This is also a series that I started after my dad died, kind of about I was interested in the way that clay sags and how it has like this kind of sad element, and I wanted to make these objects that were intimate but also looked like they were sagging under the weight of being looked at.
And then this is an installation we did for Tree Fort Fest in Boise last year, and we're continuing the series this year. And a lot of our work ends up being sort of these theatrical tableaus that include projection mapping, and similarly to the bust work, where we're kind of exploring two different experiences of the world, one immediate and one more psychological. These ones include sort of like our media experience of the world. So this had like a combination of footage from our Google Photos from the past like 20 years or so, or however long we've had our Google Photos reel for, and then overlaid with like objects that Kelly sculpted from our everyday life, and then also acrylic laser cut recreations of those sculptures, and then also like newsreel and other random events that we were experiencing that were having like a big psychological impact on us, like the genocide in Palestine.
And this piece was called In Search of Greener Grass, and it's about how you're always trying to look for the next thing to make, your life better, but it's filled with objects that are repeating, so it's like the same old thing over and over again. And while we're here, we're going to make another piece. This was part of the Tree Fort Music Fest that happens every year in Boise, Idaho, and we're going to make another piece that is based on house fires. These are some of my ceramic object pieces, except for the cords. The cords are real. But so things that balance, that look like they shouldn't balance, that have this kind of feeling of, utility and invisibility. I think you said that I make the set pieces the star. And then recently I've been making traps. So this is another bust on the left that is a trap bust, and then the coils are starting to get trappy. So we need to make a pillar for that one for a show that we have in Denver at Union Hall, Denver at the end of the summer, August through October. It'll be up. That we're doing with another collaborative ceramic couple. So that's all.
Hi, I'm Julian Birch. I'm originally from Southeast Louisiana, but right now I live in Central Vermont, and I'm here in the ceramic department, but I'm also a painter. And my work is largely about memory because I have an extremely bad memory and often struggle verbally or to like verbally process things. So I find that images will come up for me over and over. And these pieces are called memory talismans, and they're all miniatures. They're like 1.5 to 3 inches in size. And I think of them sort of as like charms for remembrance. But they kind of came about from just doodles in my sketchbook, and I would go through and pick the most interesting ones and then try to sculpt them, which I found to be like a technically interesting challenge. And I really enjoy working on the miniature scale because I find it kind of difficult. Yeah, as I was making these pieces, I found similar shapes coming up over and over, like cones or like shapes with like holes or entrances, prisms. Yeah, this is more of the same, just a different, exploring like a different color palette and a different clay body. And this is, yeah, salt-fired and soda-fired porcelain. And sort of moving towards maybe a little bit more architectural elements. But so I'm also a painter. And I'm not going to be doing painting while I'm here, but this is like also a small painting, 7x10 gouache. And it's sort of like approaching the memory issue from a different angle. So rather than like creating like tangible objects from my doodles, this is more like using real spaces and then adding theatrical, surreal elements. And it took me a really long time to realize that I revisit water imagery because of like just experiencing Hurricane Katrina as a child. So that's sort of what this piece is about. And yeah, this is my last slide. But I'm including this because I think this is where I want to go while I'm here at the ranch, sort of trying to make elements of that I'm seeing in my paintings, and turning them into sculptures, and then revisiting them and turning them back into paintings. So yeah, and there's just like imagery of sort of entrances or portals. Yeah, and that's it.
Hello, I'm Michael Izell. I am originally from Indiana, but I'm based in Providence, Rhode Island now. I am a printmaker, a painter, a designer, and a commercial screen printer. These are all things that I do on a daily basis, so I find that a lot of my work, I have lots of ideas, and I usually go in like very many different directions with all of my ideas, and I find that it's hard to sort of settle and focus on one thing at a time. So here I'm going to be focusing on printmaking, and a lot of my work is inspired by classical mythology and Greco-Roman architecture and sort of surrealism, and exploring the sort of different realms of reality and dreams. So a lot of my work is the sort of somber spaces that are kind of interrupted or challenge what you're perceiving in the space. Yeah, and going back to sort of all the different like avenues of ideas that I have, I find that I do less work because I think about all of the things that I want to be doing. So a couple years ago during the pandemic, I was able to kind of set up a structure for myself where I would approach the zodiac throughout the entire year, and every month I would work on the sign of that month. And that would be an etching that I would sort of start by researching and then sketching and then doing the whole edition in that whole period of 30-ish days. And at the end of the year, I had a whole collection of all of the zodiac signs, and using that as sort of a jumping off point for me to create this space for myself where I'm focused on what I'm doing, and sort of honing in on one project and one idea. So while I'm here, I'm going to be working on a tarot deck, which is many more plates and prints than a zodiac, but they're a lot smaller, and I've been using the last year to kind of start working on the designs for them and integrating that into my art practice and sort of kind of focusing on that. So using this 5 weeks as a time to take space to actually do this entire project. Yeah, that's it.
Hello, my name is Mary Graham. I'm based in San Francisco, got my BFA from California College of the Arts in 2022, and I'm here now. I'm a painter. So this is I'm just gonna show you, I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I do vocal performance and also sculpture, but this is the body of work that I've been working on since 2022, and it's what I'm going to be working on here. It's called Value Test Brown Paper. So they're oil portraits on brown paper bags, and it's sort of like the whole project is just a reflection on colorism and Black womanhood through the lens of color, because it's like this very old kind of history that, anyway. I don't know how many of you all have heard of the paper bag test, but it was a literal, actual exclusionary device that was employed within the community on a class basis. So after emancipation, when Black people were starting to gain a little bit of generational wealth, they were starting to establish Black clubs, Black colleges. There was like this kind of class distinction that emerged, in which upper class Black people would exclude those who were darker skinned from entering these spaces. Because I think class was very much tied with color in a way, because, like if you were the mixed race child of the enslaver, then you were provided, perhaps some privileges. You might have been granted your freedom earlier. So before we were looking at just doing the portraits on the bare bag with the linen, but now I'm kind of thinking about like the implications of covering the bag, kind of thinking about the bag as like as a world in and of itself. So, and then the colors that I'm using, is that all of them? Oh yeah. The colors that I'm using are very charged, very significant colors. Beyond just skin color designations like black or white, we're also talking about like black and white as like cosmic colors, like white is also like a spiritual color. It's like the color of the ancestral realm in West Africa. Black is like, associated with the universe and the earth, Here, there's like this dark red and the lighter red. These are like, if you're like a quote unquote red bone, that means you're light skinned, but red is also like a color of possibility, our origins, but also where we go. So I've got some work to do for a show, so I'm going to be just doing some paintings on the bare bag, but this is what I'm thinking about.
Hey everyone, I'm Dotan Applebaum. I'm here in woodworking and furniture, originally from Minneapolis, currently living in Providence. I'm interested in histories of ornamentation, particularly shortly before, during, and since industrial production sort of came into power in the mid-19th century, and the transition into modernist rationale, logics, and the favoring of form over decoration. So this is taking the form of the acanthus leaf, which is very common in ornamental depictions, and sort of playing with it, making it the form itself. Yeah, big wood piece and miniature bronze casting versions. I also have a bit of a jewelry and metalsmithing practice that's sort of playing with the same ideas. There's my wonky headshot over there with the riveted spectacles, which is like the earliest known form of eyeglasses. The bottom one is playing with architectural details, thinking a little bit about Alan Wexler wanting to become architecture. And up here is playing with the motif of the clawfoot chair. This is a piece where I did a reproduction of an existing chair from the 1830s that had very traditional marquetry depictions on it. And instead, I changed those. Everything was the same, except I changed the depictions of the marquetry to the current ideals of form and beauty, which is modernist chairs. And I also do a lot of marquetry that's sort of becoming my main focus. That's making images out of wood veneer. So this is a series of 16 small panels depicting people's favorite chairs that they have this devotional love for, alongside equally designed, mass-produced, ubiquitous objects. And these are just some in-process pieces. This is sort of what I'm working on right now, a William Morris wallpaper, and using marquetry to depict that and apply it in different forms. And that's it. Thank you.